The great chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with silver light, tall windows opening to the endless stars. Hundreds of banners hung from the ceiling, each one representing a proud race. The humans stood at the center, a small group compared to the towering alien ambassadors who surrounded them. The air felt heavy, full of judgment. Ambassador Hale of Earth's coalition stepped forward. His uniform was neat, but his face carried lines of war and sleepless nights. His voice did not tremble, though every word seemed to weigh 1,000 tons. "The Krith Dominion moves closer each day," he said. "They have destroyed 3 of our colonies already. They will not stop with us. They will consume the galaxy. We beg you, stand with us." For a moment there was silence. Some ambassadors exchanged uneasy glances. Others looked down at the floor, unwilling to meet human eyes. Then the first answer came, sharp as a blade. "The Council of Arkan will not fight. We lost too many in the last war. Your struggle is not ours." The tall, scaled representative flicked his tail and sat back, unmoved. Hale's jaw tightened, but he did not respond. Another voice rose, smooth and cold. "The Vayari have signed no treaty to bleed for humans. We advise you to surrender to the Krith. It is the only logical choice." The hall shifted. Murmurs spread among the delegates. Humanity's allies, the ones who had traded, shared knowledge, even laughed with them only years ago, now turned their backs one after another. The Tishani queen bowed her head, her jeweled crown catching the light. "We remember our pact, but our fleets are broken, our world's still healing. Forgive us, but we cannot fight again. Forgive us." The words stung more than a blade. Hale looked at her, searching for a single sign of courage, but found only fear. The Koran, huge and armored like living tanks, spoke next. Their booming voice carried across the chamber. "We are warriors, but we do not waste strength on hopeless causes. To fight the Dominion beside humans is to throw away our people. No." Each refusal cut deeper. Hale's hands curled into fists at his sides. Behind him, Captain Rise whispered, "Sir, they're abandoning us." The room grew colder. Some ambassadors left their seats entirely, robes sweeping the polished floor as they walked out. The sound of their retreating steps echoed like betrayal carved into stone. Humanity had entered this chamber with hope. That hope was dying. Still, Hale tried once more. "You think the Krith will stop with Earth?" he asked, voice raw but steady. "You think once humanity is gone, your borders will be safe? They will come for you too. And when they do, no one will be left to stand against them." The council did not answer. Some avoided his gaze, others smiled thinly, as if humankind's doom were already sealed. Hale felt the silence press down on him. He could see the faces of his people in his mind, the children in refugee camps, the miners working without rest to keep fleets alive, the families watching skies darken with enemy fire. They had placed their faith in him, in this council, in the promise of allies. That promise had shattered. One last voice came from the corner. The elder of the Lyrans, soft-skinned and ancient, leaned on his staff. His eyes were full of regret. "We cannot help you, we are sorry." That was the end. The chamber was quiet, except for the hum of the translation machines. Hale closed his eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them again, and his voice carried through the silence, strong and unbroken. "Then we fight alone." Every ambassador froze. The words struck like thunder. Hale did not shout. He did not beg. He simply declared. Behind him, the other humans straightened, their faces fierce with the same stubborn fire. Reyes stepped forward, her voice hard as steel. "Mark this day in your records. Humanity will not bow. We will not run. We will fight until the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath. And when the Krith come for you, remember who stood when everyone else fled." Gasps filled the hall. Some ambassadors looked ashamed, others sneered, but none spoke. Humanity had drawn the line. The humans turned together and walked out of the chamber. Their boots struck the floor in unison, each step echoing louder than the silence of the cowards they left behind. No allies followed them. No banners lowered in solidarity. They were alone. Yet as the great doors closed behind them, Hale felt something burn inside. It was not despair. It was resolve. They had no choice but to carry the burden themselves, and somehow, some way, they would. Outside the chamber, the stars stretched endless and cold. But to the humans, they no longer seemed so empty. Earth was waiting. Humanity was waiting. And if the galaxy would not stand with them, then humanity would show the galaxy what it meant to fight. The humans returned to Earth carrying nothing but the weight of rejection. News spread quickly across every colony, every city, every outpost. The Council had abandoned them. Instead of despair, something else took root. Factories that once made cars now forged armor plates. Civilian freighters were stripped and armed with makeshift cannons. Engineers worked sleepless nights, turning scrapyards into shipyards. On Mars, workers gathered in red dust storms to weld old frames into combat vessels. On the icy moons of Jupiter, miners who once dug for resources now carved warheads from the ice and ore. Even children felt the change. They painted walls with bright words, "We stand alone." Ambassador Hale watched the transformation with grim pride. Humanity had always been divided, arguing over borders and politics, but not now. For the first time, Earth and her colonies moved as one. Generals shook hands with governors who once opposed them. Farmers gave up grain to fuel the soldiers. Scientists abandoned projects of peace to build machines of war. Captain Reyes stood at a command station, her voice carrying across the room. "We will not win with numbers," she said. "We will win with creativity. We will fight smart. We will fight together." Her words reached the young recruits. They had never seen battle, yet their eyes blazed with determination. Old veterans stood beside them, showing them how to load rifles, how to fly outdated fighters, how to survive against impossible odds. In the great shipyard orbiting Earth, an ancient battleship was pulled from its grave. The hull was scarred, the engines weak, but crews swarmed over it, giving it life again. They named it Defiance. It was more than a ship. It was a message. Each day, fleets of Krith grew larger at the border. Scouts brought back terrifying reports, endless formations of warships, armored beasts bred for slaughter, weapons that could erase cities. Yet when these reports reached the people, fear did not spread. It hardened their resolve. On Earth's surface, crowds gathered in the squares. A boy climbed onto his father's shoulders and raised a wooden sword. A girl held a banner higher than her head. The people cheered not for victory, but for survival, for defiance, for the right to stand and fight. Night after night, the leaders met in dimly lit chambers. Maps glowed with red marks of enemy positions. Each plan seemed more desperate than the last, but not one man or woman spoke of surrender. Hale listened to them argue, then finally spoke. "The galaxy thinks we are finished. Let them think it. But when the Krith come, they will meet something they cannot measure. They will meet the will of humanity." The room fell silent. Every face turned toward him, and every heart accepted the truth. Alone or not, betrayed or not, humanity would prepare. The days blurred into weeks. Families wrote letters to soldiers, soldiers wrote letters to families, but none mentioned fear. Only promises. Promises that they would stand until the end. From the oceans to the skies, from the smallest colony to the heart of Earth, one voice rose above all. It was not spoken by leaders, not written in books. It was the voice of a people bound together by defiance. We fight alone. The first attack came at dawn on the colony world of Leora. Families were still asleep when the sky split open with fire. Krith warships descended like a storm, their weapons tearing through defenses before alarms could even finish sounding. Towers collapsed, streets burned, and in minutes, the peaceful settlement became a battlefield. Admiral Kessler, commanding the nearest human fleet, received the call for help as screams and static filled the transmission. His fleet was small, old ships patched together from scraps, but he did not hesitate. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered. "We're going in." The Krith expected easy prey. They expected surrender, silence, or retreat. What they found instead were human ships charging headlong into the fire, engines burning past safe limits, guns blazing until they overheated. The first battle was chaos. A freighter converted into a warship rammed a Krith destroyer head-on, exploding in brilliant light. Fighters dove between enemy lines, striking weak points, refusing to back away even when outnumbered. On the ground, soldiers with little more than rifles faced armored monsters bred for war. The Krith beasts were twice their size, their claws tearing through metal, yet the humans fought with a kind of madness that came from knowing there was no one else coming. Entire platoons were lost holding bridges, buying time for families to escape through hidden tunnels. Admiral Kessler's flagship shook with every impact, sparks raining down on the bridge. A junior officer shouted, "We can't hold, sir." Kessler stared at the burning colony below, at the transports fleeing with children and elders. He answered without hesitation. Then we buy them more time. The battle dragged into hours. Human losses mounted, but so did the Dominion's surprise. For every destroyed human ship, a Krith vessel bore scars, crippled by desperate maneuvers. Even the enemy commander hesitated, realizing this war would not be the quick extermination they had promised. When the smoke cleared, the colony was in ruins, but survivors still lived, carried away on ships that had no right to escape. Humanity had lost much that day, but they had denied the Dominion complete victory. Across the stars, whispers began to spread. Reports carried by spies and traitors told of humans who refused to surrender, humans who fought like cornered wolves, humans who threw themselves into battles they had no chance of winning and still made the enemy bleed. The Krith had crushed countless civilizations before. They had expected fear. What they found instead was fury, and that fury had a name: humanity. The fires of Leora had not yet cooled when the call went out across every human world. No more waiting, no more pleading. Humanity would rise together. On Earth, old rivalries between nations were buried overnight. Leaders who once argued now signed their names to one banner. The colonies followed, eager to prove they were part of the fight. For the first time in history, there was no Earth versus Mars, no colony against colony. There was only humanity. In the factories of Luna, sparks lit up the dark tunnels as workers welded weapons onto cargo haulers. In the deserts of Mars, entire cities turned their mining equipment into massive cannons that could be mounted on orbital stations. On Titan, farmers who had only ever held tools now carried rifles, their breath fogging against their helmets as they stood in formation. The spirit of unity spread faster than any order could command. Musicians wrote songs of defiance that echoed in the streets. Artists painted murals of human soldiers standing against shadows. Children sent letters to soldiers at the front, promising they would grow strong enough to fight one day too. Every citizen, from the richest executive to the poorest laborer, found a way to serve. Hale walked through the streets of Earth's capital and saw it himself. A man gave up his last bag of grain to feed a soldier. A group of women stitched uniforms by candlelight. A boy no older than 10 handed out cups of water to exhausted workers. No one asked for payment. No one asked if they would win. They only asked what more they could do. Captain Reyes trained new recruits in endless drills. She watched them stumble, watched them bleed, but never saw them quit. Many had never held a weapon before, yet their eyes carried the fire of people who had no choice but to fight. Veterans taught them every trick, every survival tactic, every lesson learned from wars past. In time, those recruits began to move like soldiers, bound by one purpose. The Krith fleet at the border grew, their war machines sharpening for the kill. But inside humanity's scattered worlds, a different force was growing. It was not built of numbers or advanced technology. It was built of resolve. From the smallest asteroid colony to the oceans of Earth, one voice rang out, louder than the fear, louder than the doubts. Humanity stood not as scattered planets, not as broken nations, but as one people preparing to fight for survival. The galaxy had abandoned them, but together they discovered something far greater than alliances. They had discovered themselves. The Dominion turned its eyes toward Vega Prime, a jewel of human space with rich resources and shipyards that fueled the war effort. Every strategist on Earth knew it would be the next target, and fleets gathered in desperation. The human armada was outnumbered 5-1, its ships older, its weapons weaker, its soldiers barely trained. Still, when the enemy arrived, humanity did not retreat. The battle began with a wall of fire. Krith warships darkened the stars, their formation perfect, their weapons striking with deadly precision. Human ships scattered, weaving through asteroid fields that circled the system. It looked like chaos to the enemy, but every maneuver was planned. Hidden charges detonated inside the rocks, hurling asteroids into the enemy line. Entire squadrons of Krith ships were crushed by stone and shrapnel before they realized the trap. Fighters dove into the gaps, their pilots risking everything. A squadron of converted cargo ships swung around the flank, opening their hulls to release swarms of missiles that had been disguised as mining tools. The Dominion's advance faltered. They had not expected humans to fight like this. Dirty, clever, using every scrap of space as a weapon. On the surface of Vega Prime, soldiers braced for the enemy to land. Civilians who had never seen war took up arms beside them. Old men loaded rifles, young women carried crates of ammunition, even children helped dig trenches. When the Krith finally broke through the orbital defenses, they found a planet that had already turned itself into a fortress. Admiral Kessler's flagship shook as enemy beams tore through the shields. His officers shouted warnings, but his eyes stayed fixed on the tactical display. "Hold the line," he growled. "They must not take Vega." Hours turned to a day. The battlefield became a graveyard of burning hulks and shattered steel. Yet for every human ship destroyed, another threw itself into the fight. Crews refused to abandon stations even as fire consumed their decks. Pilots guided crippled fighters straight into enemy cruisers, sacrificing themselves to buy one more minute for their comrades. When the Dominion finally withdrew, the system was littered with wreckage. Half the human fleet was gone, Vega Prime scarred and smoking, but it still stood. Against impossible odds, humanity had held. Word of the battle spread like wildfire through the stars. Traders carried the story, smugglers whispered it in shadowed ports, refugees repeated it in hushed tones. The humans had bloodied the Dominion. They had faced the storm head-on and lived. And in distant worlds where alien races had once turned away, doubt began to stir. Perhaps humanity was not doomed. Perhaps they were something else, something the galaxy had never seen before. The victory at Vega Prime came with a price so heavy it nearly crushed the people who bore it. Cities across the colonies held funerals for those who never returned. Families gathered in silence, staring at empty chairs where fathers, mothers, and children had once sat. Burned ships drifted as monuments in orbit, their broken hulls a reminder of the cost of survival. Hospitals overflowed. Wounded soldiers lay in long rows, some missing limbs, others clinging to life with nothing but grit and the determination of their doctors. Supplies ran thin, and surgeons worked until their hands trembled. Still, they whispered to each soldier the same words: "You made them bleed. You saved us all." On Earth, streets once filled with cheering now carried the quiet weight of grief. Yet even in mourning, the people did not collapse. They built statues of the fallen, carved names into walls, and sang songs that promised those sacrifices would not be forgotten. The pain did not break them. It forged them into something stronger. Ambassador Hale stood at a memorial, watching children place flowers at the base of a stone etched with thousands of names. He knew those children would grow up without parents, yet he also saw fire in their eyes. They understood, even without words, that humanity was not defeated. The Dominion's commanders celebrated in their war halls, claiming victory despite their losses. But their soldiers spoke in hushed tones of the humans who fought like madmen, who refused to fall even when crushed. Stories spread of a pilot who steered his burning fighter into the heart of a battleship, of a medic who shielded an entire squad with her own body, of miners who stood with nothing but drilling lasers and still held the line. On Vega Prime, survivors began to rebuild. Rubble was cleared, homes were raised again, and food was shared among neighbors with nothing left of their own. The people refused to abandon their world, even as smoke still drifted from its scars. Soldiers who could no longer fight taught the next generation how to hold a rifle, how to fly, how to endure. Captain Rise walked the docks of the damaged fleet, her uniform torn, her face marked with exhaustion. Crew after crew saluted her, not because of rank, but because she stood as one of them, battered yet unbroken. She answered with the same nod each time, her voice low but steady: "We're still here." The galaxy had expected humanity to shatter after such losses. Instead, the opposite happened. Their unity only grew. Their spirit burned hotter. Even alien refugees, abandoned by their own governments, began to whisper that perhaps Earth was more than a doomed world. Perhaps it was a beacon. The price was unbearable, but in paying it, humanity showed the truth. They were not fighting only to survive. They were fighting to prove they could not be broken. The Dominion gathered its strength for one last strike. Reports from scouts spoke of an armada so vast it blotted out the stars, ships stretching from horizon to horizon, engines burning like a second sun. It was the greatest fleet ever assembled, a hammer meant to crush humanity once and for all. Every human ship was called to arms. Freighters that could barely hold together were patched with steel plates and sent into the line. Old cruisers that should have been in museums were dragged into orbit, their guns oiled and ready. Even passenger liners were stripped of seats and filled with missiles. It was not a fleet born of power, but of desperation, of defiance. Admiral Kessler stood on the bridge of the Defiance, the ancient battleship now carrying scars from every battle since the war began. His officers looked to him as silence filled the air. He activated the comms, his voice carrying not just to his own crew, but to every soldier, every pilot, every ship in the human fleet. Today, they come to end us. Let them come. Show them we do not die on our knees. Show them what it means to be human. Across the stars, cheers answered him. Pilots tightened their gloves. Soldiers checked their weapons one last time. Civilians who had volunteered as gunners wiped the sweat from their brows and stared into the void, knowing the enemy would arrive at any moment. And then the stars went dark. The Krith Armada dropped from warp, their formation perfect, their weapons already glowing with fire. The size of their fleet was enough to make the heart stop. Yet the human ships did not flee. They spread out, forming a thin wall between Earth and the enemy, a wall made of courage more than steel. The Dominion's commander sent a message across the void. His voice was mocking, cold, certain. Lay down your arms, humans. No one comes to save you. This galaxy does not care for your survival. For a moment, silence answered. Then Captain Rise replied with a single sentence. We never asked for saving. The battle erupted. Human ships charged, hurling themselves into impossible odds. Fighters darted through massive formations, their small size turning into a deadly advantage. Civilian vessels unleashed hidden weapons. Satellites that had orbited in silence for decades came alive, releasing bursts of energy and shattering enemy wings. The void filled with fire, with screams, with the thunder of war. It was not a clean fight. It was madness. Ships collided and exploded. Crews chose to ram rather than surrender. Entire squadrons sacrificed themselves to take down just one enemy cruiser. The human fleet broke apart, reformed, struck again, a storm that refused to settle. From orbit, Earth watched the sky burn. Every family knew someone out there among the stars. Every child, every elder, every soul held their breath as the greatest battle in human history raged above their heads. Even as the human fleet began to crumble, no one spoke of retreat. No one spoke of surrender. The message had already been written in blood and fire. If humanity was to die, it would die standing. The sky above Earth was a furnace of fire and ruin. Human ships burned, their hulls torn open, their crews fighting until the last breath. The Dominion pressed harder, certain victory was within their grasp. But something strange began to happen. Their formations broke apart. Their supply ships went missing. Their engines failed at crucial moments. It was not luck, it was human cunning. Engineers had hidden viruses inside captured drones, turning the enemy's own systems against them. Small victories spread like sparks in the storm. A squadron of fighters with no fuel left dove into a Krith carrier, detonating in a chain reaction that split the giant ship in two. A crippled freighter used its last power to ignite its reactor, dragging 3 destroyers into the explosion. The Dominion commander watched in fury as his perfect fleet began to bleed. The humans would not yield, and worse, they were dragging the mighty Krith into the mud with them. On the Defiance, Admiral Kessler gave his final order. Drive straight through them. Break their spine. The battered ship charged into the heart of the Armada, guns blazing, shields collapsing. Every weapon fired until the barrels melted. Enemy ships swarmed, hammering at the old battleship, but the Defiance kept going. Its last volley shattered the Dominion flagship of the explosion lighting the void brighter than any star. The Krith, stunned, broke. Their fleets began to retreat, discipline crumbling under the weight of losses they had never expected. For the first time in their empire's history, they fled. Humanity, bloodied and burning, had forced the monsters to run. Silence followed. Earth's people looked to the skies and saw debris drifting like new constellations. The price was unbearable. Half the fleet gone, millions dead, but Earth still stood. The humans were not conquered. They were still alive. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The races that had turned away from humanity listened in shame. The ones who had called them weak now whispered their names with respect. Refugees began to speak of Earth not as a doomed world, but as a beacon. Humanity had not only survived, they had proven that unity, defiance, and courage could shatter even the strongest chains. On the surface of Earth, survivors gathered in the squares. Captain Reyes, weary and scarred, stood before them. She looked at the faces of those who had lost everything yet still stood tall. No grand speech was needed. She raised a tattered human flag, its edges burned, its colors dimmed but unbroken. The crowd roared, not with triumph, but with something deeper. They had endured the impossible. They had stood alone when the galaxy abandoned them, and they had won. The words spoken in the council chamber now lived forever in their hearts. Then we fight alone. And they had.